Hey there, welcome to this video. Today we're going to be having a look at how to make the cloth for a Warre hive. We're using the instructions from Abbe Warre's book, Beekeeping for All, and we're going to have a look at how to make the flower paste that seals up and stops the Hessian cloth fraying, and also how we get the correct size. So on page 42 of his book, it tells us that in order to make the flour paste we need to mix a litre of water with 4 or 5 soup spoonfuls of wheat flour, or better still, rye flour. But first, before we do that, we need to actually have a look at what we're making. So here is a standard Warre hive, and if we take the roof off, you'll see underneath there we've got a quilt box, and if we take that one off, we're straight onto the tops of the frames. So these bars, the bees will propylize between them and stick to the bottom of the quilt box. Now we don't want that to happen because we want to be able to take the quilt box off easily. So what we do is make a cloth that goes in between those two, and the bees will propylize to the cloth, but then we can just remove the cloth whenever we want to get to the bees or remove any of the frames. So how we do that is we take a piece of Hessian cloth like this, cut it way oversized, and as you can see that hangs over the edge by about 1 inch on all sides. We can kind of get a feel for the size of where we're going to cut it, but we don't cut it until we've sealed the cloth with the flour paste. The flour paste will make it stiff, so it won't just flop around like that. It will stop the edges from fraying, and the bees will then propylize wherever they want to adjust the airflow within the hive. So if they want more airflow, they can remove the propolis, and when they want less airflow, they can build up the propolis between the bars, and that will stop the air from passing through. Now the bees will chew the cloth, so you need to have a few of them and replace them every couple of months, every maybe 6 months or so. And what you can do with the old cloths is just place it between a couple layers of newspaper, roll it up, chop it up into pieces, and then you've got great smoker fuel, because this will all be full of propolis, and yeah, it'll burn really well in your smoker. So the next step is to go and make our flour paste. So we'll go into the kitchen and see what we need to do for that. Looking at the bottom of this feeder, you can see where the bees have built up the propolis. Now I've scraped the majority of this off, but you'll see the pattern between the bars, and that's how they build the propolis on the bottom of the cloth as well. So this replaces the cloth when you're feeding, and then you put the cloth on and take this one off when you're not feeding. So we're only going to make a half batch of the flour paste today. So here we have 1/2 litre of water. So we'll put that in the pan. Turn that one on. Now in his book, if we turn back to the page on the flour paste, so boil it while stirring with a spoon until it becomes thick and homogeneous paste. It is good to add a small amount of starch to the flour. Well, I haven't got any starch, so I'm not going to be doing that, but I have got, what have we got here? Dark rye flour, so that should be perfect. So we've only used 1/2 litre of water, and in the book it said to use 4 or 5 soup spoonfuls for 1 litre of water. So if we go for 2.5 soup spoonfuls, that should probably do us alright, but we'll see. So there's our flour, and find a spoon. There we go. So that's 1 tablespoon. That's about a soup spoon maybe. So I'm going to go with 2 of them. 1, 2. Good. Now we need something to stir it with. Yeah, got a little whisk. Only had some sugar syrup on it this morning, so it's basically clean anyway. And that will go in there, give it a little stir. Okie doke. So whilst that's boiling, let's go back and actually have a little bit more of a look at Abbe Warre's discussion on the cloth and why he thinks it's a good idea. Somewhere in here there'll be there we go. So on this page, page 53, so he says, let me read, on top of the box we place a simple coarse cloth that we often get from pieces of old sacks. We prefer this cloth to oilcloth or to boards. Boards are impermeable and require force, a shock, when one wants to lift them. The bees get angry. Oilcloth is impermeable and does not peel off as easily as plain cloth. For let us not forget, everything we put in the hive is propolized, and as a result sticks to it. We may therefore only look for an easy way of removing it. Yet our cloth peels off easily. We take it by one left corner and pull it horizontally to the right. In this operation there is no shock and we only uncover the part we need to inspect. Furthermore, the main quality of this cloth is the permeability that the bees can modify, augment or reduce, adding to or removing from the cloth the propolis that they deposit everywhere. This propolis allows bees themselves to ventilate the people's hive as they did in old skeps. It is good to renew the cloth frequently. Furthermore, pieces of it can be put in the smoker and used. So that's pretty much what he says on the cloth. Sorry about the bad reading. I am terrible at reading out loud. I highly recommend this book, and I highly recommend the Warre Hive system. It's obviously a good system. I like it. Boxes are quite small, and one brood box is made up of 2 separate boxes. So you can see, got the same below. 8 frames in each box. Got an entrance reducer down here, so you've got the medium, small, and then without it you have the full size of the hive. So if we put that on back in, I like to use the medium reducer. Here we've got a few inspection windows, nice tempered glass. Same again up there. Hives are just made of pine, I think, not cedar. Doesn't need to be cedar. Not picking up the whole box. And then over here, I'll show you, we have a feeder. So this feeder goes on top of the hive. We take that one off, and then that one goes on, and then we can fill that with syrup. The bees can come up through there, over the little ledge, down, and then drink the syrup from in here. And to complete this one, we place the quilt box on top, and then our roof goes on like that, and there you go. Hardly looks any different, so the bees don't notice it as being different, and it will allow me to feed this hive completely separately and within the hive. Nice and simple. This is actually like a melamine, so super easy to clean when the bees do propolis it, which they always do. And if I just show you what we do when we're adding more space, let's take one of our queen excluders and another box. Let me set it up for the majority of the year. Okay, let me show you. So this is the standard Warre hive. It has obviously got the observation windows, which makes it slightly different, and it doesn't have a landing board at the front, but I don't think they really need a landing board. So the brood box is 2 boxes, and the bees will overwinter in 2 boxes, but during the summer, or spring, summer and into early autumn, the bees will want more space. Now, how this hive differs from a standard, say, national or Langstroth hive, is instead of adding a box on top called a super, you add a box below and give the bees more space, so they travel down into it, and naturally they will just backfill the top box with honey. Now, in order to guarantee that you're not going to get any brood being laid in that top box during the summer, and you just only get honey put in it, what we can do is put a queen excluder in. Now, it's a little bit more tricky than, say, adding a super on a Langstroth or a national hive, but it's still not that hard. So in the spring, when you come to do your spring inspection, you have a look at your bees, and if they have filled up the box and there's not much space and they look like they could do with a little bit more space, then what we do is pop our box off of our base, move that to one side, and then take another box that's empty, pop that down on our frame. Now we have wax starter strips, about, I don't know, 8-10 mil deep, and they slot in. So we've got 8 frames, good bee space in between, so the bees won't, that space there won't be filled up with comb, and yeah, it's perfect size for the bees. Now what we then do is take our bees that we took off, put them back on top. Now here's the bit that can be a bit tricky. You want to then get the bees that are in that top box down, so, or at least definitely the queen down, so you can either go through each frame, make sure the queen's not on there, make sure she's gone down into the bottom box. I mean, she should be in the bottom box anyway, because that will be where they have been naturally laying the brood, and the top box should be majority of it honey anyway. So once you've done that, and you've got the queen, or you're pretty sure you've got the queen down in the lower box, lift off the top box, put that to one side, and this is in spring still. Take your queen excluder, pop that one on your box like that. Now, yeah, that is the correct way. I'm never quite sure which way it's supposed to go, whether you're supposed to put that one directly on top, but I think that seems... Well, I suppose you could do it either way. I don't really know. I'm still quite new to beekeeping, so I'm not quite sure whether you put it that way up, like that. I mean, that seems logical, because then you can take it off without it falling out. Yeah, because if you put it down that way, that wouldn't really work, would it? You'd lift that off and that would still be stuck. So no, it must go that way. I haven't actually used queen excluder, but this is what I intend to use it for. So you've put that on, and obviously the queen's below the queen excluder. It doesn't really matter if there's bees in the top box with the honey, because they can go through the queen excluder. It's only the queen that can't. So that one then goes on top of the queen excluder, and we can close the hive back up again. If you're wondering why the quilt box is empty, or just so you know, that would normally be full of some sort of material that would wick moisture out of the hive. And then we put our roof back on. Now the bees will come into this bottom box and start building comb. This box will be currently where the queen's laying, and then this top box with the queen excluder will now just be filled with honey. Now this box can be taken off in autumn, because the bees will have now moved completely down into the bottom box, and this box will now be their honey box. So you're constantly cycling the boxes through, you're never getting any old comb, and because it's natural comb, you can't just spin it down in a centrifuge and chuck it back into a hive all empty. These combs have to be crushed and strained, so, or cut combs. I can open that one up. I've only just painted these, so that's why the paint's a bit stiff, and the latches are a bit stuck. And there we go, so that's another one. And that would be how you add space to a Warre hive. You can add 2 boxes to the bottom if you have a particularly strong hive and you know you're going to have a good nectar flow, and then you can obviously take 2 boxes off the top. But you always need to have the queen excluder maybe just on the top box, because the queen will still want quite a bit of space to lay her eggs and things, and you don't want to honey bind her. So here we are back with our flour paste. It is ready now. So it's still quite runny, but it's because it's hot. I mean, when that cools, that will all thicken up quite nicely. We've got our Hessian cloth here, and we know that that's oversized. So what I want to do is take my flour paste and pour it on. Lovely. Don't need too much, it will spread out quite thin. And then with my gloves, just ease that out. It's very hot, sorry. I might actually use a spoon. Perfect. There we go. So now we've got one wetted out flour paste cloth. And what we want to do is take this, lift it up. Nice. You can see it's a bit stiffer, but obviously soaking wet still. Now we want to place this on our hive like that. Great. Smooth it all out. Make sure the edges are all in contact with the edge. And there we go. One flour paste cloth. That will then dry and become hard, and it will actually lift up much more like a solid sort of tile, but it can still be bent and rolled back in order to open up the hive without disturbing the bees too much. It's much better than a standard wooden top board. Now if you want to feed the bees through this without a top feeder like I have, you can cut a hole in here, or not a hole, but cut like a U shape, peel that back, and then you can place a jam jar feeder just on top of the bars, place an empty box on top, then your roof back on, and you could have a jar feeder in the top there like that. in my case I have the top feeders, so I don't really use the jars. But if you did want to use the jar, just simply cutting a U shape there and then peeling that flat back would do it fine. Alright, well that's it done. Normally I make a couple at a time, they do keep quite well. Here's another one that I've cut, but is obviously not wetted out. I might do that one as well. Let's do one more and then we'll be done.